Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session of our mentoring and networking session at the Big Apple Film Festival. We have with us today Roy Wall, who's going to talk about financing an indie film. And we're going to get started. We'll have Roy introduce himself. Now, the best way to, it's a Q&A, so the best way to get questions to Roy is to use the React icon in the bottom and raise your hand, and you can ask Roy questions directly. And that's probably the easiest way and most effective. So let me do a little spotlighting and we can get started. I can have Roy introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. Let's get you some money today. So that's what I'll say in terms of introduction. Just kidding. So I'm a producer. Just nice to meet you all. I'm not sure who's in the room, how much experience you guys have. Some of these things that you'll probably hear today have been things that you might have heard in other sessions, or maybe you've made them. So that's great. If you have questions or anything you'd like to add, feel free to jump in. Like Andy said, just raise your hand and jump in. But I usually prefer like Q&A type of conversations, but we'll talk about the basics. We'll talk about some important ideas about what films are and what the job of a filmmaker should be, and in addition to making the film. And so, that's basically it. And in terms of my background, long time ago, I'm much older than probably all of you put together. That's why I wear a hat. And but I was just going to say I started in Canada many years ago, too many years ago, in the post-production department of some big studios, which gave me some direct access to Hollywood producers, Hollywood directors, which was not indie film. And Canada is a very different country, not just geographically, but also the way they treat film is very different. It's run by public funding, which enables different kinds of work. So I'm not sure if we have people from Europe in this call, or Canada, or any country that has co-production treaties, which is a political term that enables you to get free equity from the government. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. And if there's somebody that's in one of those countries that public funding is a real thing, then feel free to ask questions about that too. I'm sure it'll help everybody else too. So, and yeah, so I started in some of the studios in the post departments, and then from there, just like most of us, I had dreams of making movies, and I started doing shorts independently while making a living. And then I had an opportunity in New York about, I think now 16 years ago, and I came down to New York City. I produced my first feature film about a year after I arrived, which was with a Sundance talent. It was a very different time. This was in 2009, and Netflix acquired our film. Again, very different time. The business model has changed since the 90s. It's changing every 5 seconds. So it's a catch-up game. And then, in some films, I was more involved in fundraising. In some films, I was more involved in creative producing. In some films, more involved in launching in terms of distribution strategy and marketing, producer of marketing and distribution. So it's always case by case. But yeah, our slate in our company, Studio Autonomous, is very broad. We've done rom-coms, we've done impact movies, and also we do a lot of service deal as well. So that's just the gist of it. More to talk about later. So this session, I was really thinking about what to offer from everything else that you might have read or watched online, or even attended other fundraising sessions. There's some basics that are similar across the map for most ideas, but there's a lot of when it comes to fundraising, there's a lot of behind the doors and little secrets that a lot of producers have. And it's not like a secret that it's like illegal things or anything like that, but it's more like, the trade is so small and people create systems to fundraise, and then they usually keep it to themselves. The only way to learn about these is to assist a producer or work for a larger company for many years and get to learn about that. But if you're completely independent, like I was, and then you basically do a lot of trial and error, and trial and error actually takes time. And very important concept, actually, you can never buy back the time that you lose. And what I mean by that is, if you focus on a movie for 10 years, which is great, and it's a masterpiece, that is even if you have $1 billion, you can't buy back the time that you, I don't want to say lost, but you basically, you've spent these times to growing this one product, which is a movie. I call it a product. So I apologize for those artists in the room, but today's session will treat film as an intellectual property, very similar to a regular property, a building down the street, very similar ideas, with the difference being obviously that it is actually a story. So really talking about strategies and tips, we'll talk about a little bit more like the general, the structuring, what you have to do step by step for those of you who've never done this before. And for those of you who've done it a little bit or in progress, please have patience. You will probably get to hear about some things that are interesting too. So I'll start with this, that financing is extremely important. You know that because without money, you can't make anything. But what's more important than money, and you only realize this after you raise the money and you make your movie and it launches and maybe even it wins at Sundance, you realize that what's more important than money is actually distribution. Without distribution, you can have the best film, a masterpiece, critically fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, that also maybe nobody bought, right? So there's a lot of aspects to making a movie, and these are the things that I think it's important to really think about as early as possible, similar to a gestation process. For example, an elephant gives birth. I think the gestation process, and correct me, someone in the room if you know, I believe it's 24 months. So it takes about 24 months for an elephant to give birth. You also have to decide this is like, it's part of a strategy. You have to decide how long do you want your gestation process for this specific film, because you'll make hundreds of films, right, in your lifetime, hopefully. How long should this gestation process take? Should it take 2 years, 3 years? Should it take 10 years? Is this a masterpiece that I'm gonna fight for all my life and work on this one script that I have for 40 years and it's my, mega whatever? And so those are important decisions because it relates to your fundraising strategy. It relates to your sustainability as a filmmaker, making a living and staying afloat. And it also depends on cash flow. So if you're, for example, trying to do an animated project, is a very slow moving machine. And it's a lot more money depending on, of course, what kind of tools you're using, but it's usually expensive. And it takes many, many years. That could be a good thing if you have a production company that has that as a fee. And for 8 years, you're working on this great animated project while the business is also making a little bit of revenue, right? And servicing other clients and so forth. But with the focus on one film, if you're an independent filmmaker with no production company, you're completely, you have a screenplay, you just have to think of the types of different kinds of fundraising models that you have, right? And we'll stop, by the way, if I speak too fast, please, ask to repeat or something like that in the chat. I do like to talk a lot, so bear with me. So there are many different ways to fundraise, but you have to think of a few things. One, co-productions. What is a co-production versus what is a co-venture, right? These are two different terms. If you are one of those lucky people, and I will call it lucky, where film is treated more as an art form rather than a startup business to sell, because every movie is actually a business to sell. This is a key point, and many of us, the artists, we don't want to really think about that. We hope that someone out there is going to treat it as a business and make it happen. But I do want to underline once again, and I know that this is a repetition, but probably one of the most important jobs, if not the most important job, is actually your ability to fundraise, because that's the only way you'll be able to continue to make movies. And planning that and making peace with that is extremely important. And practicing it is even more important. Just like going to the gym, you have to do it. And you have to, even if you're shy about it, you just have to go for it and learn from your mistakes. Ask 40, 50, 60, 100 people for funds and get a lot of no's, and then learn from that and make your pitch better. So you really have to love sales and pitching and things like that, which is not only for fundraising, but also to get partners, to get potentially celebrities, to get different kinds of deals for your movie, and also for your career. If you're great at pitching, you can definitely navigate the treacherous waters of this industry. So I want to underline, the first thing I want to say is co-productions. So co-productions is a model where certain countries have decided many years ago. Film is, as you know, is a very new art. Is only 100 years old, and it's changing every day. So it's a very new art, and it will probably change a lot more within our lifetime and beyond. It is based on storytelling, but it is a technology called film. So co-productions are productions where the countries that have decided to support art, like many countries in Europe, some countries in South America, Canada, and many other countries further far east and even Australia, the public, the people's tax money, commissions the filmmaker to make something about their culture. This is a very important element of fundraising because it basically still treats film as an art rather than a business to sell. Essentially, the public tells you, okay, your film is good enough, it has the right package, it has the right inflection related to the country. And then, you apply for your funding, and there are many countries that have different fundraising instruments. In some countries you can get up to 60,000 euros just to write a screenplay, and it's crazy to hear that, right? As based in the US, because those are less likely here. But it's all about how to raise the cultural awareness of that country. And once you have one country's funding on board, let's say 1 million euro from Spain, and if your story, and this is a key point I do want to mention, because what you decide to make has a direct impact on how you can fundraise, right? So in the European model, or South American or Canadian model, or a huge percentage of the world's fundraising model, right? The session is called Indie Film Fundraising. It's not just America. So it's really important to mention that if you have a story and you fit the point system, if the cinematographer is from a certain country, if the lead is from a certain country, if you're not the director, you're the writer, but the director is from a certain country, those give you opportunities to go into these public funding sources, which then might have some impact on your story. Yes, they are paying. The one who pays sometimes do call the shots, so you have to think about that. For example, in Australia, if you have a movie and you apply for certain funding, the system actually of the funding system, the public funding, they commission a screenwriter that's not yours or you to come in and work on your movie for 6 months to make it public funding friendly. So, and there are other countries that do censorship for different things and so forth. But this is co-pro, right? If your film is not eligible, if you don't have another citizenships from one of those countries, you're probably not eligible. But if you're a producer and you have other movies, you could still look into it, and there's ways to sort of go in that direction. And there are multilateral and bilateral agreements. What that means is sometimes you can only have 2 countries fundraising, and sometimes when 2 comes together, certain 2, the third one gets enabled. And then there's European funding, Creative Europe. So the list goes on. I'll stop with co-pro because I have a feeling like most people here are less eligible, but feel free to ask me if one of you are from those places. Co-venture is a very different concept from co-production. Remember, co-production in the rest of the world is actually, really political term. Co-venture is when you have actual investors from other countries that want to support the film for various reasons, which we can talk about, why. So I do want to rewind for a second and say something. It's a film is a startup to sell, and if you haven't heard that elsewhere yet, I'd like to definitely underline it, because you have to think of it that you have a screenplay, it's a blueprint to make something. So you have to convert that like a currency. You have to convert that idea of your story. Otherwise, you can just write a book and launch your IP, and great. From there, maybe that's a great life too, and that's something that definitely has value, and we can discuss it for those of you who are proactive writers that write a lot. But essentially, a film is a startup. So you want to have an exit plan from a startup, right? Because the film itself, unlike a building, is not a productive material, right? No, most people can't go to the film and ask the film, make me something. The film can't make you something. So it's not a productive material, right? And you're pouring tons of money into it, maybe your own money, hopefully not. And we'll discuss if you're thinking about that. I have my thoughts about why you shouldn't do it. But if you have too much money, that's a different story. But really, you can't have the film produce something on its own. So it's not really a productive business. It's almost a single-use item, right? And so that has implications, because then your sales becomes limited. When sales becomes limited, fundraising also has a problem with that. The question is, how do you get your film more sales friendly, right? That's the question that we'll ask today. If you're not one of those lucky ones that you've been commissioned to make a movie, meaning somebody else out there has a screenplay and you're the director, they hire you to commission you as a service deal, or the public funding of that country commissions you, they're commissioning you, remember, then you have a startup business with an idea of an exit plan. You have to think about your exit plan. Nobody else is going to think about that for you, right? Everyone that gets on board on your film, maybe you have a partner that's thinking about it, but most people, they come in, they're a part of your dream, and they help you make it happen, and then they leave and they have their own dreams. But you, on your other hand, you are the person that's gonna usually stick through the film from A to Z for up to probably 15 years. And that sounds like a lot of time, but when it comes to catalog business, is not that long, Why? Because a film takes a long time to mature, maturing meaning potentially making its money back. If you have a film, let's say you made it. By the way, I do want to stop. We will go back to the basics. Now it's more like general picture, just to clarify. Yeah, usually if you have a film and you're trying to mature it, it takes about 6 to 8 years to slowly start making your money back, and you're making it in pieces. So unless you're one of those lucky ones that's in the news, right? And feel free to, if one of you in the room has a friend who is actually one of those lucky ones, feel free to share your story. But usually that's in the news, right? So, and there's, statistical information related to that I'd like to share. Then it's going to take you some time to make your money back. That, again, has an implication on how you fundraise. It's not a great idea to go to an investor or a partner to say, we're going to make this crazy amount of money. Here are the examples. This is how movies make money. All that stuff, it changes for every movie. Again, every movie is a business, separate audience target, separate clients, which are the buyers, right? You have clients. Unless you're a distributor, your client is the buyer, which is a distributor, a TV network. If it's a social impact film, maybe it's like a panel series. Unless you're really into self-distributing, excuse me, your film yourself, then you're stuck with having to get it to a client. So that has a strong implication, which I want to really talk about. At this point, I do want to stop for a second if someone has a question. Otherwise, I'm moving to the next note of my own here. No? Okay, good.
Aaron?
Yeah, is there one? Sorry.
You can unmute.
Did I do it? Did I do it right? Okay.
Yep, you're good.
Sorry, I left. I was having a Wi-Fi crash. This is all very helpful, and thank you very much for doing this. I'll try to make this concise. So I have a baby production company, about 3 years old. We have had great success with a couple of shorts we made. We have taken on a really big feature film as our first feature venture that we just kind of fell into it, has a lot of CGI, and the budget is 1.9 mil. And we had great fortune because this started as a pilot. We made 70K in a week, and we were like, wow, can't believe that happened so quickly. This is going to be an easy road. And then after that, it's been like, so speaking to everything you've just said, but specifically to first-time feature filmmakers, do you have any advice for that? Because we've gotten a lot of different thoughts on it, but anything you'd have to give would be wonderful to hear. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Erin. Thanks for sharing that, by the way. I think it's great that we're all sharing here too. Yeah, definitely will have. And as I speak, there's going to be some tangible things that you can definitely grab from some of the notes. But I think with first-time features, it's always a catch-22. It's always a catch-22 whether it's your first time feature or your last time feature, hopefully never last, but it's always a catch-22 because you need something that potentially a donor, an investor, a public funding partner needs that you probably don't have yet. So if you're a first-time feature director, the best thing you could probably do is have a great team, so that's going to be helpful to sell. But then the question is, who are you going to sell, right? And that's something that we're going to be talking about. How do you identify these people, if it's companies? So without knowing too much about the film, obviously, usually what people try to do is partner up with other production companies, right? But why would others partner up with your production company? So that's the thing that we'll go into in a few minutes. But and Aaron, if I don't answer it through the rest of the call, please let me know, and I'm happy to go back to it. But for the first time features and just sort of to go back, some of the business stuff. For those of you that are still on the screenplay phase, there are 6 to 7 things one has to do. And packaging is obviously one of the most important elements, because a package is what sells. Never forget, the people behind the film is actually the main product, as far as I'm concerned, is actually the people, right? The movie itself is a promotional material for the product, which is the person behind the film, right? The creative, right? Usually it's the director, the writer, the auteur. If you're the producer and you're a creative producer, then you probably have a slate of plan, which is then you end up being also part of the product. If you're launching a unique animation model, a unique technology, an AI film, and I apologize, hopefully I don't offend anyone with AI, but just if you're doing something different as a company, then that's also the product. But usually it's the filmmaker you're trying to launch. The first time feature filmmaker, documentary filmmaker is what everybody's trying to find. And that's why obviously festivals exist, so that people get discovered using the film as an ad, not to sell, right? In this equation, the goal is to sell the person, right? So then the question, Aaron, comes, if the first time film, the first time features film is actually a promotional material, does it make sense to spend 1.5 million unless there's a considerable funding that's willing to be lost, let's say? And I don't mean to say you're going to lose money, but we're just talking about statistics here. There's no shame on talking about that. A lot of startups fail. You probably know the startups rule. Films are startups. It's the same thing. And failing means financially, it might do really well. It might win Sundance, but never get distribution. It might win some other huge festival, and it's great for the bio of the filmmaker and the company, but it doesn't. And for some investors who are looking for potentially a vanity, which is definitely something that people sell, then it's a success. But financially, again, if the question is, Aaron, about finances, then you have to decide why the first-time feature director needs 1.5 million without knowing the film. What if the film's actual market value is 200 and you're spending 1.5 on it? So you're overspent by 1.3. Why, right? Because you want to launch the talent and launch the production company. It's an ad expense, literally. So it's a very expensive thing. And, if you come from a little bit more privileged background and you have more access to funding, maybe it's easier. But for most people, they usually have one shot, to try their first feature. And if it works, it's great. If it doesn't work, they find another job, or they do something else. But it's really hard to make your second film after that. There are lots of positive things that I'm coming to as well, but I do want to mention those things. So
I don't want much
sorry.
time, but one tiny follow-up with that.
Sure.
We do have some name talent attached, and how much do you think that has?
It has a strong impact. Yes.
Yeah.
Name has a strong impact depending on who the names are, but definitely, names, strong team, it comes down to that. Especially if your goal is to launch director more in the festivals versus, let's say, there's certainly a business model for like delivering rom-coms to a smaller network, for a smaller budget, and that's a business model for a lot of production companies. Christmas movies, rom-coms, these are things that obviously Christmas movies are relevant every Christmas for the next 1,000 years. you know, and rom-coms are always friendly. So there's definitely a model there for a production company. But if you're looking for more like art house launch or festival winnings and things like that, then yeah, if you have talent, it helps with certain festivals. It also helps with fundraising, right? Yeah. So you have your screenplay. The next thing you have to do, you have to have someone do a budget. So it could be a line producer, it could be you know, someone that actually has done a feature film similar to yours a few times, ideally. If you're tight with money, then go for whatever you can grab, but you do need some kind of a budget to have a plan. Oftentimes, first-time feature filmmakers, and I do a lot of mentorship, I do a lot of market meetings, and I meet amazing creative people. And when I ask what their budget is, they say 5 million. And I always ask, why is it 5 million? Because they say it's production design. We need this to be this way and that way and this thing. Yes, you certainly need it, but 5 million is a lot to put in to your first feature. So it's going back to the gestation process, how long you want to take to actually give this birth. And I'm not comparing it completely because I know that real birth is much more complex and much more delicate, you know, but for film, it's in the case where it's the launch, why spend 5 million, right? So it's when you can do a more of a, what a startup does, a minimum viable product. And minimum viable product is, can I make something within this amount of time to reach this goal so that I can show to agents, I can show to, you know, if it's a promotional material, which every film is a promotional material, you know, the biggest movie that, and please correct me, Andy, or anybody else if I'm wrong, but I think the highest grossing movie of last year, which was Barbie, is literally an ad for a Barbie doll. You know, it's like, it's actually the ultimate commercial. You know, it's a great film. I do want to say that. I loved it so much. Amazingly written, greatly directed, but it is about a toy. So keep that in mind. Marvel, toys. So there are great series about, you know, the industry and what films serve, you know. So anyway, screenplay, then you have your budget. Hopefully you have your budget. You have to immediately get a lawyer that has done this before, because you're going to be selling securities, right? It's a legal thing. So you have to set up an LLC. What is an LLC? LLC is a business entity. It's just a registration. That's all it is. Depending on who you work with, what state you're shooting in, there might be different incentives to do the LLC in different ways. Usually, it's you want to have 2 LLCs. One LLC for the IP, right? The screenplay itself has to be owned by an entity. And then the other LLC, the single-use product, which is the production that owns the IP, or in other words, not owns actually, the production LLC that's assigned to produce the screenplay, right? What that does is actually, when you get your tax credit, when you get your investment, none of that goes to the IP, but it goes to the production, right? Because there's something called production rights, and that can be sold. You know, it's a very interesting concept. But so you have 2 LLCs, one that owns the screenplay, the other ones that's still owned by the managers of the LLC, whoever they are, that has been assigned by the IP owner, the LLC, to produce it, right? And then this can be owned by Aaron, say, your production company, right? So you can have multiple LLCs for different reasons, for tax credit and so forth. Usually independent films, again, it really depends on what your movie's about. If it's an impact film, if it's a mission-driven film, right? You probably also want to have a fiscal sponsor in the movie. A fiscal sponsor enables you to receive cash and give back to the donor a tax-deductible donation receipt. This is an important element of the independent film fundraising, right? A lot of great festivals, as you know, have amazing movies about untold stories, and a lot of those untold stories have an equation of different kinds of funding, including donations, right? There's a lot of philanthropy that takes place in film. It's storytelling. It's you know, helping young generations see the world in new ways. So there's a lot of philanthropy that happens. So screenplay, budget, lawyer, LLC setup, fiscal sponsor, which you should get, and of course the package, right? So those are the 6 things to keep in mind. Any questions before we move to the next slide? Wow, time flies.
We have one from Olga.
Olga.
Come on in.
I have two questions that are not totally related. What
Okay.
do you think is a good range for like a first feature totally indie in terms of budget? Like a range would be great.
I think again, it depends on the film, but try to go, see this as a climbing up the stairs, right? You don't want to do 5 million. You probably don't want to do 2 million. 1 million is not a bad thing, depending on what the movie's about. But people, first-time feature filmmakers, have done films for 50K, 100K, 200K,
That's what I was wondering. So like
700K.
or less, like 100,000, like something reasonable. Yes, in terms of like
Look, go
the
ahead. Sorry.
relationship between the production value and the budget, right? So you want most bang for buck, I would assume, because if you want to sell it, you want to pay everyone, but then you want to sell it. So you still, you still want to leave room for the people who buy it to make money off of it.
Yes, that the truth is like in any business, right? We as film producers, filmmakers, we are suppliers. All we do is we supply content to somebody else, right? Unless we are distributors too, which we're not. Maybe there's one in the room. We're suppliers. So what does a supplier try to do is try to make it for a minimum cost to the most amount of revenue, right? So, but with the problem with the film is sometimes if your budget is too low, you can't attract those talent. You're not, then that has other implications, like you may not be able to sell, right? And so there's an equation. Every film, that's why it's a little different. First time feature, don't go too high. You don't have a real reason usually. Keep that for your next film. It's not a problem.
So, and my other question is with the IPs, with the two separate IP, the LLCs, one for the IP and one for the production. Can you have an LLC and have different IPs, just one LLC, and then you put all your IPs into that LLC, and then you have like the different LLCs for the different productions?
You can have it. I would want to know the reason why, but you can certainly have it. So if you have a production company and you have a bunch of screenplays, yes, each of them should be a registered LLC as a separate IP, so they're a business itself. And yes, your production company can own them, but the issue with that is depending on what state you're in. If for some reason your production company gets sued, there's a level of assets that they might have access to, depending on what state you are. So you're giving yourself that many more liabilities.
But I meant just for the IP. So for instance, I have separate IPs. I have screenplays, but I also have like games.
Okay, great.
I just put that underneath one LLC, or do I have to make separate LLCs for each IP?
You can certainly put it under one LLC. I would definitely advise you to talk to a lawyer about the implications of that. But yes, it's doable, but it's also dangerous. That's what I was trying to say.
I see. I see. Okay.
One owns all. That means if that one has an issue, you have that many more liability at the same time. But can you do it? Yes. Definitely speak to a lawyer.
Okay, got it.
I love that you brought up games, because games actually are productive businesses. It's very interesting because this is an important thing. As we're storytellers, we should definitely be aware of the entertainment business, and which involves games, which has omniverse with obviously films, maybe less indie films, but certainly there's a level of it. Games are things that you build once and you launch it and you get feedback from the users of the game, the players. And then you launch the second one because you just made it better. You have an opportunity to re-edit the story of the game, and that builds. You're building an audience. You're building a productive business. Whereas with film, again, you build one expensive product. Hopefully, that one product you have, you can hopefully sell a single product that you work for years. Keep that in mind. So pitching is key. I do want to jump into pitching. I will rush a little bit more because I had way too much to talk about. So pitching is key. You have to love to pitch. This is like, it's your movie, and try everything to attract people. That's a little bit outside of the box. You really need to do things outside of the box. Trying to make a movie, fundraising it, and try to get into one of those top 6, 7 film festivals or 10 festivals is not a strategy. That's just wishful thinking. A strategy is something else, because everybody's trying that. So you try that as well. That's part of your, hopefully, plan A if you're going for prestige. Then you have plan B, plan C, plan D. There are all these plans. That makes a strategy, right? But pitching is a part of the game. If you're having a challenge with pitching, I would definitely suggest practicing it as much as possible, because your ability to fundraise, your ability to get talent, your ability, all kinds of abilities to attract people to your business, your movie, your startup, is in your ability to communicate what you're trying to do, what your overall level strategy is and why they should be a part of this. Pitching is the most important thing. You know, think that you're working as if you're working in an advertising agency and you're pitching on clients to get their business, get their funding involved, get the actors involved, because maybe this will be the one, you know, so forth. So, and pitching involves, you know, your project deck, which you have to usually make a project deck, which, you know, I can probably over email send some samples, but it involves your synopsis. You know, it's like a profile for the film and the people behind it. It has a log line, it has synopsis, it has some pictures. You haven't made the movie yet, so you don't want to go too far with pictures. Pictures can make or break you. And you know, the team, you know, what you're trying to do. If there's a plan of launching or distribution, you could write it there. But people that know the industry, they know that until you have a real deal, all this stuff is just an idea, right? So, and yeah, like I said, the project that includes your team, additional partners, and one thing that I would like to suggest, and you should really force yourself, in my opinion, to try to come up with this, an X factor, you know? An X factor is very broad, and I'm so sorry to do that, but definitely one additional thing that might differentiate you from everybody else, because I respect everybody. I think everyone's screenplay is a masterpiece. Every director is a masterpiece director. So I start from that point. Now, what else do you have? You know, so that X factor is key. What can that X factor be? It really comes out of the DNA of the project that you have. If it's about certain mission, like a untold story mission, you know, maybe it's about some form of empowerment, about a community or something like that, then try to see how you can really elevate that in your pitch and your package, but also in a way that actually directly affects the people that are hopefully are going to donate or invest in your movie. And at the same time, you give back, right? You're a business, you have to find a way. If you're doing a mission-driven thing, you have to find a way to give back, not just in festivals and vanity, right? So, and we'll go to that hopefully a little bit later, but structure, you know, for those of you that already know, because I know that there are some experienced people here, but for people that might not have heard this before, most indie film structures in the US work, think of a full pie, 50-50, right? 50% is owned by the producers, and that's a very broad term. We'll talk about what that means. And the other 50% is owned by the investors, right? So let's say you're trying to raise 100K for your movie. That's like total budget, just as a simple example. You get the money from many sources, and maybe a percentage of that is investors. And we'll talk about what sources there are. There are about 38 sources or so. So there's a lot. And basically those investors that are on that 50% pool, they're entitled for when the money starts coming in, right? They might be in a unique position to get it first or not. But once you start making revenue, the first dollar that moves in to the pie gets split in half, right? Once the money is made by the investor, it gets split in half. And then from that on, you know, if you didn't sell it right out like big time, it's going to take 6 to 8 to 10 years to slowly make additional revenue, right? So that's why it's important to make continuous amount of films, as many as possible, because these things take time, right? Unless you have one big sale. A lot of, you know, newer production companies that come into the business with funds, what they try to do, just so you know, they have a lump sum of money, not a lot, but let's say 400K, not like too much. And they know that making money from movies are hard. So what they do is they divide that into 20, which is very little amount. And they put 20 investment in 20 separate indie films, knowing that 1 out of 20 maybe makes a little bit of money, right? So it's diversifying it. But hopefully you'll get more than 20. So that's a different story. But the structure is, again, 50-50, investors and producers. Producers pool, it's called producers pool, but it includes basically as many and as everyone as possible. When you're making a deal with a talent, you might offer them, in addition to pay, because maybe you have limited cash, you might offer them a few points from that 50% section, which is the producers pool, a few points. So that might make the deal a bit sweeter. Same thing with cinematographers. If it's a name, maybe you pay them a certain large amount, hopefully some amount that's enough for them, and then some points to make this deal sweeter. So these are the ways you can negotiate. And most investors, it's important to explain to them that it takes time to make money from the movie, or most likely not. I think what you want to do is get an answer from them almost saying no, because otherwise it's going to go forever. Like they're going to toy with this idea that they want to maybe invest, maybe not. I think the idea here is to try to sell investment ideas as much as possible, but then try to get a no as soon as possible and practice more and see what they like. But oftentimes you want to identify investors that are in different ranges. So for example, who to go to. You have the lowest hanging fruits, right? You have the middle hanging fruits and the high hanging fruits. Maybe the high hanging fruits could be a large production company, someone that's out of your network. The lowest hanging fruits, and this does happen, like any startup, not just movies, is friends and family. Most first independent feature films are definitely starts from the friends and family region. And then there are other things you can do. If your film's budget is 100K, you're obviously not going to go after all the money for friends and family, but it's okay to reserve, let's say, 20% of that, like just as an example, right? You can do less, you can do more. And the rest, investors, donors, fiscal donations through grants. So there's so many other ways that one can fundraise. We talked about gestation process, and don't forget, money can't buy time. Money can't buy time. You work on a film for 5 years, somebody pays you 10 billion, you can't buy back the 5 years you just spent, right? So that's a crazy example, but it's an important point, because your ability to fundraise actually does depend on making more movies and having the cash flow, right? So we can talk about tax credit if anybody wants, but I do want to stop for a second to see if there's another question.
I want to ask you something about getting multiple investors.
Sure.
You said, like, if you get a big investor, they also can basically have a say in what the film turns out to be. If you have multiple investors, do they all have a say in, like,
Good
change
question.
here and there? So
Good question. In none of the films that I produced, no investor had a final say on anything. Just to give you sort of that, it really depends on the relationship you have with the partner. Like there might be a production company that's a large name that becomes an investor or a co-venture as well, and in return they might want a final cut, which is crazy sounding, but in that equation, if they're paying a lot of money to that movie, they're almost commissioning you, So I think independent filmmakers don't like the idea of like being commissioned, or in my opinion, or having the final cut taken away from them, which is, I totally agree, and it's very difficult. But in that equation, when somebody else that puts in a large amount, and you have a first-time director who's never directed a feature film, can't guarantee anything. So, an investor might want to have at least an input in that. But I think as you're trying to get your investors, I think it's important to have a very open conversation about that, saying to them that this is going to be a crazy ride, we might lose money, but and most likely we will, but I know that doesn't sound very positive, but it's good to tell them, because you do want someone that's willing to take that loss, and you do want someone to trust you for your creativity, and but yeah, if you do have investors that have a final control of the movie, then you're in a difficult situation, because they might actually stop you from making any deals. You might have a deal on the table that they might say, no, I don't want that. A deal could be better for the producer, but worse for the investor. So there's a lot of things in that play. Yeah, it really depends. It's case by case. I don't know if that helps Andy, but
that's okay. Did you want to go on the tax credits, or?
Yeah, sure. So two things, X Factor. I do want to give an example about X Factor. So we once produced a movie with the trans community in New York, and we were trying to figure out how to fundraise for it, and it was very difficult, because it was just hard to find financing for it. It was a first-time feature director, and a lot of unknown talent, so it's very, very challenging. So we thought, how can we do this? How can we do this? And we came up with a model called eBay My Film, which is essentially, it's the same thing as crowdfunding. It's no different than Kickstarter or Indiegogo, but it was a single-use fundraising methodology that we decided to try, and it worked out for us, which was we would ask for people to give us their used goods, and we did this like national campaign. We would receive boxes from different states with almost new rollerblades and new cameras and things like that, and some weird items too. And we would essentially give that person that donated all these used goods to us a tax-deductible donation receipt against the value of the items. And these items that we would receive actually would be listed on our eBay page, and we would sell them. So $1 would become $2. What that means was we would get money from people that wanted to buy the rollerblade on eBay, but also the donor of the rollerblade receives a tax-deductible donation receipt. And we went through New York Foundation for the Arts to set up this system, which was our fiscal sponsorship. And so that was really helpful for us. That was our X factor to try to fundraise, and we raised about $100K just from that side of it. And it was very helpful for us. At the same time, would I recommend anybody else to do that? It's a whole business in itself. It's a lot of work. You're dealing with a lot of used goods, the storage, the mailing. So we had an army of interns and different people that actually helped us. It was a lot of work. I wouldn't suggest it, but it helped us sort of get noticed a little bit. It was a little X factor. It showed to our donors and investors that we were willing to go above and beyond. It made people believe in us more. So those are some of the X factors. Going to the tax credit, as Andy just suggested too. So when you're raising funds, think of this as a pie chart, right? So you want to have as diverse as sources as possible, unless you have one source that's willing to give all the money, which is very rare, or you have your own funds to put into it, which I don't recommend. If you're looking back for a return, there are better investments, put it in the market. Then you'll, wait 20 years and continue putting, and you'll make $1 million and something, right? But a movie for 6 to 8 years might not make $1 million revenue. So there are easier investors, people that know money, they know how they can get their money back. So people that invest actually in movies are investing for different reasons, not just getting money back. For tax credits in New York, and this does affect Olga's question, in New York, they recently meaning 2 years ago, I think, changed the law. The tax credit in New York State, I believe it used to be 25, don't quote me on it, 25 to 30% for basically any movie at any budget. And 2 years ago, they changed that. They raised the budget cap to 1 million. So if you make less than 1 million, you get no tax credit from New York. If you make a movie more than 1 million, you're eligible for the eligible expenses to receive a literal cash, from the state, which takes many years to get, about 30% of the funding that you spent on the movie. So let's say you spent 1 million, and the eligible amount was, I don't know, 900K, just as an example. 30% of that comes back to you in several years. So this is a cash flow thing. Investors like that because they know at least this is coming, But what you can also do, and there are tons of companies that will essentially buy your tax depth, so that 30%, and they will sell you that so you can get that funding earlier at some kind of an exchange. Let's say 80 cents a dollar. So if you were entitled to get, let's say, 60K back or like 100K back, let's say, from the state, you're now getting back only 80K because you're asking another company to cash flow that for you so you can use it for the film, etc. So some people do it. It's a lot of work. Usually not a first-time feature thing to do, but can be done, So that's called essentially a tax credit. And a lot of states offer it. A lot of countries offer it. There are different models in Canada. As Americans, you can also go to Canada in certain provinces of Canada. You can also, there are additional funding that they can offer you if you're willing to hire people from their province. But once you go to different territories, the catch is you have to hire local people at the rates that you can't really negotiate that much. So you're probably going to overspend in order to get this money. So sometimes it doesn't work. It's case by case. So the pie chart that you're trying to fundraise money should include investors. If you're doing a film that's co-production friendly, co-production funding. If you're doing the kind of film that is more untold story type of films, You have a lot of philanthropy and donors. If you're doing a fun action film or rom-com, and you still have donors for that. You have grants for more the untold story parts of things. Just to be clear, you have tons of grants for that in the U.S. New York Foundation for the Arts is a place you can look at. There's 2 or 3 other really strong film organizations like Gotham, formerly known as IFP, Film Independent, that can help you with that and give you access to those places. Then you obviously have sponsorships. If your film is about a certain game, let's say it's about basketball, just as an example, you can certainly find a sponsor for that. There's so many places you can go. It's not just donors and investors. It might have an impact on your film, but hey, you got the money. The idea is to get the money and make this so you can make the next one, because the idea is to make the next 10, right? You're not just doing one. And then of course the pre-sales and things like that are less likely for even like a second time feature now, but like pre-sales was definitely more of a thing. And for larger companies, it does happen. Let's see. I think that's kind of like the general of like the sources you can go, but there's different models like gap financing and different things that we can talk about if anybody's interested. I think like the main thing here is, if you ask me, is making sure you research a lot and making sure that you don't overspend on a movie. And if you're having difficulty with fundraising, start with the lowest hanging fruits, like grants. It slows you down, no doubt about it, but at least it's moving things forward. The more grants you have, the more likely you'll find an investor, because they believe in you, because you can provide results, right? The package is very important, like not just talent, but you do want to have people in the movie that have done this a few times, that give that security to these outsiders that don't know anything about the film industry, that are willing to give a little bit of money. And then not thinking in big numbers, but thinking in like division of that, meaning if you're trying to raise 1 million, if you divide that to 20, all you need is to sell 20, 50K, right? If you divide it to 40, all you need is, it starts becoming easier. It's just a lot of units you have to sell, but it just becomes easier. And what you give in return to investors that want it, it's a lot of things, especially those, filmmaking is a very sexy and fun thing, and show business. There's a lot of people out there that want to be involved in it. They just don't know how to be involved. And at the same time, they don't know if they can make their money back. So it's important to tell them that this is not necessarily to make their money back, and explaining to them it takes maybe 6 to 8 years to maybe make your money back, right? So it's all these things that have to happen. But things are definitely hard, because you're not only now with the streaming, you're not only fighting for relevance for your movie the week you're launching, but with the films that are launching that week, but you're fighting with the entire catalog of, I don't even know how many movies are out there now. There's no lifetime to watch all of them. So and there's catalog businesses that are coming back, and you probably saw during COVID, there was a movie on Netflix called Contagion that became relevant from like, I don't know, some of you were not born. It was top 1 movie. So you're fighting with a movie that was made 40 years ago at the same time. It's not easy. So that's why it's choosing the right film, trying to get the next one made, and be strategic about the gestation process. I think that's key. How long you want to pursue this movie during fundraising, during production, also at the same time during the release. You could be as involved as you can be, depending on the distributor. So those are some of the things. I think we're hitting almost the hour, so I want to ask if there's questions. Yeah. Questions? Yes, I see one there.
Yeah, this is kind of going back to the thing you talked about before, tax credits, like relating to creative control and Final Cut and stuff. From your experience, like the lower budget you have, and I know it probably depends on the production company and how much money they've got and how big of a company they are, but let's say it's like your standard New York kind of place, like a Smuggler or something like that. If you're like sub 1 million, is it more common that they're going to be like more inclined to let you do your thing in terms of Final Cut?
I mean, It really depends. I have a horror story from a friend who's like a really old friend of mine, who worked in huge companies, and then he quit his like entertainment business job and decided to make his short film, which is not even a feature, obviously. But the entire money came from one source, and the guy turned out to be crazy. So I think like it's really case by case. But yeah, of course, the larger partners you have, the more say you can have. But you do want to avoid it as much as possible, because in the end, unless that person actually has a real input that they can give, like it's the money isn't enough. You're not a public company with shareholders that should have a say. This is a private business. It's about the launch and the art, and yes, we had one film that was about 1.2 that had three partners, big partners, and the biggest partner wanted to have the most amount of say, but the director turned out to be stronger. So in the end, the biggest financial partner, essentially, but still the director owned the IP in that case. And he was a very well-known director with huge awards behind him. So he had the final say, and that was important for him.
So it's really just about intuition, kind of, and trying not to get into bed with crazy people.
I think that's definitely the case, but you're safe with an agreement, although the agreements can always be broken. I believe in agreements, but at the same time, people can, find ways, as we can see always in law, people find ways to find their ways. And so I think like it's one, you have to identify the lead investor that wants to be involved. And two, if they feel like they're going to have a lot of say or want to get involved, want to be in the editing room and want to give you feedback. You do want to welcome feedback. You want them to be involved, but you just have to tell them, we'll take it, and whatever works, we'll include it. I'm a big fan of like Game of Thrones strategy, meaning you let others fight about everything, and then when people are tired, you just come in and finish the movie. So so I did that a few times, and that involves investors, that involves directors that are tired of working on the same movie for years, and so you just wait patiently, and you'll find your way.
We have two more questions. One from Jesse. Want to ask a question?
Yeah. Hi there. Oh,
Hi.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. So thank you for doing this. I would love your thoughts on, you mentioned briefly on like self-financing. Just to give a brief context, I'm a commercial director. I've been working for like 15 years in the industry, live in LA, have a lot of friends. I've had a feature happen almost twice, like proper finance, casting, all the things. As always, like distribution, you get an exciting actor signed on, signs off, you use the money, you lose it anyway. I've been through those like 5, 6, 7-year curves twice. And I've hit a point of like, fuck it, I'm just going to go out and make a first film. And I luckily through that career, I managed to buy a house in LA, the value went up, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I'm kind of in the stage of writing right now, like something to go and just take money out of my house and go make $100,000 feature, which I feel is a good amount. And also basically I'd love, if you have experience in this working, not working, my expectation isn't to make $1 million of it. My expectation is to launch the next phase of my career. And just to specify, thanks to years in the industry, that 100,000 is probably more like 300, because I have rental companies, I have actors, I have a line producer, I have people that will come and work with me for free because I've given them money and jobs over the years. And I kind of feel like it's more to start the train, and then probably maybe people will buy me out of that. But yeah, you mentioned like you have your thoughts and reservations.
Yeah.
That's the brief context of it. I'd love, any experience in that, because in shorts, that has always worked for me, to just go out on a limb. And then often co-producers came afterwards when they saw the footage, when they saw the, but on the script, nobody wants to fucking go in.
Yeah.
So yeah, any experiences, thoughts, whatever are welcome.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you saw that I had reservations about that, and I'll tell you why. Number one is I think it's great that you have these connections. So it's a special case, and seems like you've actually figured out how to have a livelihood out of your trade directing, which is great.
Yeah, I've been working on for like 15 years steadily now. So that's
and this is a great example, because we have a lot of filmmakers that make films and don't sell, but then they don't make money out of their directing skill. You know, this is an important thing. So you've figured out the livelihood. That's great. I mean, refinancing home and things like that, I think like you're putting your financial, I don't know what else you have in your equation of finances and other people involved in your life. But yeah, I think if you're going into it, accepting the fact that you might lose all of it, most likely, then you're safe and you should go for it. This is my humble opinion. If you're willing to lose it, it's fine. It's a high risk business. You might make your money back. And yes, there are, you know, I've also been in films where we made the film and then towards the end, even before the festival launch, you know, especially if you get into a big festival, you can definitely sell, you know, shares of the movie and credits in the movie. You know, those are the things you can sell. But now it's not just a movie that's good, but it's a movie that's good in a festival. And people are looking for credits to, you know, essentially jump quicker in their career instead of spending 15 years to make a movie to get into Cannes or some other festival like that. They actually, you know, they see, okay, these are the movies that got in. Let's see who needs money. You know, let me just come in. And it's a very different mentality. And sometimes they get a producer's credit. It happens. So you have that option, you know, obviously. But I think like putting your own money is just as far as you, as long as you're okay with losing it, go for it. If you can't afford to lose it, don't do it. That's my opinion. Hopefully that helps.
It's like going to the casino. Only play what you can lose.
Yeah, I mean, literally that's what it is, because it's there's no guarantee. Look, nobody asked anyone in this room, as far as I know, to make a movie. No one said like, please make a movie and I'm going to buy it from you.
Yeah.
You are making a film, is a startup with the idea to disrupt the market, go to the top, and have that one of the 5 to 6 clients buy your product. Yeah. It's like so many obstacles. So as far as you're okay with the losing, that's fine. But the key point is, again, in public funding, the public commissions you, right? In independent film in the US, with startup model, nobody commissions you, nobody asks you. It's not a necessity. It's a luxury, and it's a luxury product. And you're trying to sell and you're trying to make money, and everybody's trying to do the same thing.
Okay, we have to wrap up with one last question from Robert.
Sorry, I overspoke.
Hi, sorry, I'll be very quick. Roy, thanks for doing this. I would like to see some of the slide deck examples that you talked about.
Sure. Email.
What I was planning to do, and I'd just like to ask if this sounds like a sensible use of time and money. I've already made a self-financed 50-minute movie. So that's finished, and I have like a website for that. I'd like to make a feature. I think it's sensibly written that it could be made reasonably cheaply. But I'd like to shoot it on film, so it'd be 16mm. What I was thinking of is shooting like a mood piece in 16mm. That would just be like a minute or two long. I also think it would also, I have the script, I would also have it all storyboarded. I think it would also work as a graphic novel. So I was thinking of paying an artist to sort of do a few example pages if it's from the graphic novel. And maybe all those things together, and then create a website which has got that material in, just a few bits of it, which are examples that anybody can see, and then like a login maybe, or just a single password which lets you see everything else. Does that sound like a sensible way of going forwards?
I think so. Not knowing much about the project, obviously, which is the key part of this, but I think anything that will help you get seen is great. I do prefer always first having to speak to the person before sending materials. So if you have a lot of visuals and different things, of course, there are some people that might not take the meeting, but take the link. But I would try to minimize that. You know, I think, again, your ability to communicate your story, your strategy is way more interesting than the website that is just one website, right? So I think try to get that meeting. The other thing I'll say, if you're doing all these expenses, which do have some expenses to create that, probably an idea for you is this dossier strategy, which we didn't talk about because I felt like there was no need for it. But for you, maybe dossier strategy means you have a project that's in development and you have a proven version of it, which is like the short film, I guess, the 15-minute version, and you apply to markets. There are tons of markets in the world. In the US, we have Gotham's market, which select I don't know how many now, but used to be over close to 200 projects, maybe even more. And you know, Gotham is one. Film Independent has Fast Track. Obviously, Cannes is a marché. But there are many others depending on your genre. Fantasia in Canada and Montreal, sci-fi, and so forth. So there's so many ways that you can go. And in these markets, you have what you built in some form, which is a website, but also the market itself has its own website, similar to Facebook, you know, where you have your profile, you have your images, maybe even the 10 pages of the script. You don't want to put all of it, to be honest. Stuff like that. And in the market, most markets, what happens is there are many different types of people that come to a market. There are financiers, there are people that actually want your services, might be a publicity company, a festival strategy company, might be also a manager who wants to meet with you, might be a festival. You know, for example, I met South by Southwest at Gotham Market, you know, while in post with the film. They tracked the project 3-4 years later. I think actually 2 years later. 2 years later, the film launched at South by Southwest and it won. So it's those markets are great for many different ways. But the dossier strategy is this, literally what you're doing. All that items together, but you're officially programmed by a market who's willing to curate meetings between you and potential people that you need. Yeah.
You really have to cut it off, but Roy,
No.
leave your email information in the chat box.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then while he's doing that, Lisa, I'll give you a quick, you got to be quick though.
Yeah, me?
No, you
Oh.
type your thing in there. Lisa, quick question, but then I have to run. I might
Because I've been to the American film market, and a lot of times they say you need to have a star to get your film distributed. So could you please talk about how do you do it without getting a star? You know, because that's the big thing. Like, how do you get your money back if you don't have a star in your film?
Yeah, good question. I will tell you one thing. They will always give you another reason for why they can't distribute your film. So star is just the easiest way to tell you that. But yeah, if you don't have a star, it really depends on the film, what the film is about. You know, if it's about dating, then you try to find a distributor that is going above and beyond to launch a film and that is in line with that does different kind of campaigns for that film. For example, I know one film that did their marketing on Tinder, you know, to launch their movie. So I think it's case by case. We made this one film, as I said, about the trans community. We had no stars at the time, and we were able to fundraise it through different models. And like I said, the eBay My Film and some private equity, a lot of donations from grants and whatnot. But I think, you know, distribution is always hard, even if you have stars, and even if you have a big star, films can fail. So there isn't a real equation, but AFM for sure, that's that place. For that place, you definitely need that. So try to get a star. You know, it's a catch-22, but try to get a star. And but even if you have a star, it's no guarantee. They might say this type of film doesn't sell now. So I don't think a great film has a, you know, there's always an excuse to say no. I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah.
Okay, I got to bounce, but
Okay.
Roy, I'm going to have everyone just contact me for your email address.
Yes, please. Yeah, sure.
All right, everyone okay with that? We'll got to end it though. Thanks.